Greetings, 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 greetings. Is I your king, King Clifford Jefferson, a Senator Godfrey, the fifth kind of man Jew, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem, on the reincarnation of our king, King Edgar the Peaceful, which you call the King of Peace. It is April the 24th, 2024, which is the birth year 2974. I'm here again to speak to the English heir successors, all those who are part of their noble family. And this is for you to be able to understand what it is that you were called to do from the time of the day you were born. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Give me a second. Their noble family. Okay. Once again, it's I, your king. I'm glad to be able to be here to assist you again in another marvelous lecture for your awakening in regards to the purpose of intent of the Third Temple English Church of England, which was divinely prepared by your ancestors who have came before you to lead the way. All right, so I'm not going to be long-winded. I'm going to give honor to my queen, Sister Godwinson from the House of Godwinson, as well as my Archbishop Mount from the House of Belmont, as well as all those who participate in the upliftment of the English heirs and successors. All right, so I'm not going to hold you long. This lecture and lessons pretty much tell it after or for the one I did previous to this one. So if you haven't watched the previous lecture and understand that lecture, do not watch this one. Okay, but this is an extension or part two, I should say, of that lesson. All right. So without further ado, let's get started. If I have any moderators, good morning to you. Once again, do as always noted in that position for those who are trying to get understanding, make sure that you inform them directly and correctly according to the precepts of the Third Temple English Church of England. All right. So let's get started. As always, I have a narrative from someone who has a little bit more academic learning process for which the majority of you are used to. All right. This does not define or confine the Third Temple English Church and the members of our society to what's being said. We just use it as a narrative for all those who have a hard time understanding what we're saying here at the Third Temple English Church of England, as well as being uttered by your king. Then I'll have somebody else give you a narrative as well, so that way that when you hear me speak of it, that it will be pretty much in line with the narrative. Okay, so with that, let's get started. If there's any questions, please post them. Hopefully we won't have any problems with the screen today, but if so, so be it. If there's any questions, please let me know in the comments or the chat. All those who are watching, if you know anyone that has a platform that would like to put us on the meeting for such as a tele lesson like this, we're pretty much open for that. But once again, it must be maintained according to the precepts of our religious institution, our religious society, or our, as I should say, our religious body of politics. All right, so without further ado, let's get started. Oh, one more thing. Today we're going to be talking about, once again, the the Kingdom of Jerusalem, a little bit about the Knights of Templars. We're going to be talking about Holy Sepulchre and what was the purpose of the tent for these terms that were created by the Roman Catholic Church, going all the way back to Constantinople, making their way all the way up to what we call the Kingdom of Jerusalem, as well as their how it falls or makes its way to what we call the Crusades. All right, sir, the Crusades. And when we hear this narrative from what we're about to talk, when we say Crusades, Crusades is, as you can see in the narrative, it's just a mission that members of society are ordained in regards to whatever purpose and intent the crusade was created for. And we know majority of the crusade, as going to be spoken of, was created by the Roman Catholic Church to protect the property from invaders such as what we call the Muslims. Okay, get a full-rounded word for them, the Muslims. All right. All right. So from the first crusade all the way to the eighth crusade, it involves Christianity versus Islam. Okay. Christianity versus Islam and their interpretation of what the true religion is that bring forth the aspect of what we say peace. Because right now there is no peaceful religion on this planet because every nation on this planet, some fashion is at war. Okay. And that's a reason for the Crusades was to participate in war. All right. And the majority of the participation in war, if it wasn't for protecting the estate, it was for commerce. All right. Which you will see in the narrative. So without further ado, let's get started.
The Crusades were military campaigns waged by Western European Christians during the Middle Ages for the defense and expansion of Christendom. What made a crusade distinct was that warriors involved in the fighting received spiritual merit, usually a plenary indulgence granted by the Pope. A crusade was considered by Western European Christians to be a holy act, an act of sacrifice and piety for the love of Christ. 4 centuries before the beginning of the Crusades, the first Muslim armies swept out of Arabia to conquer Palestine, Syria, Mesopotamia, Egypt, North Africa, and Spain, some 2/3 of the Christian world. Between the 7th and 11th centuries, Christians fought wars against Muslims to prevent them from making further conquests into Christian territory, or to reconquer what had already been captured. In Spain, Christian kingdoms waged wars to the Empire East, centuries of war with Muslims for control of Anatolia and other regions. In the 11th century, the Seljuk Turks, recent converts to Islam, swept through Syria and Palestine. In 1071, they defeated the Byzantines at the Battle of Manzikert, conquering almost all of Anatolia. In response, Pope Urban II called the First Crusade, asking knights from all over Europe to band together and push back the Seljuks. Over the 12th and 13th centuries, the popes called more crusades to the Holy Land and also called for crusades in Spain to help push back the Muslim powers. Crusades against Muslims were not called with the intention of converting them to Christianity. Rather, they were called to regain control of territory that had been previously Christian but had fallen to Muslim armies. Jerusalem had been conquered by the Muslims in 637 and was considered particularly important to Western Christians since it was the site of Christ's crucifixion. Indeed, Jerusalem was revered as the holiest site in the Christian cosmos, and it was particularly important to Western Europeans that it be brought again under Christian rule. When in the 11th century, news arrived that Christian pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem were being harassed and killed knights to join the First Crusade. Although the Crusades were called to reclaim lands, greed was not a primary motivation. Professor Jonathan Riley Smith, the world's foremost expert on Crusades history, has proven that crusading was incredibly dangerous and expensive, and that virtually none of the knights who went could expect to gain wealth. Indeed, they often bankrupted themselves crusading. The primary motivation for crusading was spiritual, with the knights joining because they believed that they were doing God's work by fighting to protect Christian pilgrims and to reclaim holy sites like Jerusalem, and that involving themselves in a crusade would win them spiritual merit. The Crusades to the Holy Land saw many failures but also many successes. The First Crusade and the Third Crusade, for example, were both very successful, though ultimately later, at the close of the 13th century, the last Crusader holdings in Syria and Palestine would be captured by the Muslim Mamluk Empire. However, the Crusades in Spain achieved lasting victory, with the whole of Spain Christians. Later Crusades would also be called against the Ottoman Turks, such as the Crusade of Lepanto in 1560. We present regular videos and podcasts on the Crusades.
As you can see in the picture, you see an emperor or a king not holding a globe, but holding the church, okay, in his hand. He's holding the church in his hand, so that's very symbolic to where we're going with this in regards to the Establishment Clause. All right, we know the Establishment Clause of the what we call the First Amendment, which we call religious freedom, is rooted in what we call the Clarendon Constitution of 1164, passed by Henry II, son of Godfrey V, Contraband Jew. All right, we know the court systems that were set up here in North America were established by Henry II, the Assize Courts of 1166, and that was created to be able to hold those accountable under the guise of immunity under ecclesiastical law, because under the Roman Catholic Church they're claimed to be immune as protection from God. But in the English church, or what we call the Anglo-Saxon churches, under the Benedictine monastery, you were held accountable, all right? And this was under the authority of what we call the bishop, because the bishop or the chancellor are the ones responsible for the protection of what we call the king's conscience, or what we call the king's peace, all right? So this is going to be a marvelous lecture. I hope you all pay attention to what's being said. And it all amounts to what we talked about, or what we heard in this 5-minute video about the purpose and intent and who were involved in what we call the Crusades. When we speak about the Crusade, they're speaking from the Crusade that took place on the eastern and western hemisphere of what we call Europe, all right? Of Europe. We're not over here. We're going to make that narrative fit the equation over here and what we call the Western Hemisphere, what we call now North America, all right? Because yes, indeed, these colonies over here in what we call the Western Hemisphere, now called North America, were colonies that were established by what we call the French minor, all right? Yes, going back to the Treaty of Paris of 1763, was under the Kingdom of France, and the Kingdom of France was established by Eugène Capet, who were warned with the Capetan dynasty, the Plantagenet dynasty, which was established by Godfrey V, Contraband Jew, son of Folk, the one that was ruling Jerusalem. So Jerusalem was this territory that was under the protection or under the auspices of what we call the Roman Catholic Church as a result of the conversion of the precept of Christianity, as we've seen in what we call the Dooms Law, or the Dooms Book by Alfred the Great, all right, which was a modification and a reformation of the codes that were established by Ethelbert of Kent, Opha of Mercia, as well as Anea of Wessex, okay, as well as the Mosaic Code, which were the laws passed down for the the tribes of Israel. All right, we're supposed to be the descendants of those who are supposed to be children of those who once in the territory which we call Jerusalem. Okay, so let's get on with this marvelous lecture. Hope I don't confuse you, but the main aspect of what you saw in the video, our focus point should be the purpose, intent of the Crusades. All right, not from those who took place in the Crusades that we heard in the narrative, but in reference to us as English, Anglo-Saxon Berbers from the descendants of the Plantagenet crown. All right, and territory over here. All right, that's where we need to make our connection, and that's what the connection I made. So I'm going to give it to you. So without further ado, let's get started. Crusades. All right. The Crusades were a series of religious wars, initiated, supported, and sometimes directed by Christian Latin churches and medieval periods. So we have to consider the conversion of the Anglo-Saxon Berbers to the concept of the religion enforced upon us in the 6th century by the Gregorian mission by Augustine of Canterbury under the authority of Pope Gregory I, in which they operate under what we call the Gregorian calendar this day. All right. So we didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We accepted some of the precepts of Christianity through the English Benedictine Reformation that was a cosmopolitan movement. All right. As we seen in my last video, the Clunic reform, going back to Odo of Cluny in France, was a result of the English Benedictine reform. Okay, so it was a global movement. So we see the Crusades were a series of religious wars initiated, supported, and sometimes directed by the Christian Latin Church in the medieval period. All right, the best known of these military expeditions are those to the Holy Land and the period between 1095 and 1291 that were intended to reconquer. All right, you hear that? Reconquer, to retake. All right, so intended to reconquer Jerusalem and the surrounding areas from Muslims' rule after it had been taken by force centuries earlier. This is the 7th century, beginning with the First Crusade, which resulted in the conquest of Jerusalem in 1099. Okay, dozens of military campaigns were organized, provided a focal point of European history for centuries. Crusading declined rapidly after the 15th century. Okay, that's it in a nutshell. From the First Crusade to the Eighth Crusade. All right, and in totality, that happens between 1095 and 1291. All right. Kingdom of Jerusalem. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, also known as the Latin Kingdom, was a crusader state that was established in the Levant immediately after the First Crusade. It lasted for almost 200 years from the ascension of Godfrey of Bouillon, the son of Eustace II, who was married to Golda of England, the daughter of Ethelred Unready, who was the son of our Jesus Christ, which was no other than King Edgar the Peaceful. Okay? Its history is divided into two periods with a brief interruption, and its existence beginning with its collapse after the siege of Jerusalem in 1187 and its restoration at the Third Crusade in 1192. Now, there was 8 crusades altogether, but they're only talking about the Third Crusade, dealing with the territory called Jerusalem. Okay? We must understand that. Right here. The Crusaders arrived at Jerusalem in June in 1099. A few of the neighboring towns, Ramla, Lydia, Bethlehem, and others, were taken first, and Jerusalem itself was captured on July 15th. On the 22nd July, a council was held in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre to establish a king for the newly created Kingdom of Jerusalem. You hear that? A newly created Kingdom of Jerusalem. Raymond IV, Count of Toledo, and Godfrey of Bouillon were recognized as the leaders of the Crusade. All right, and in the siege of Jerusalem. Raymond was the wealthier and more powerful of the two, but at first he refused to become king, perhaps attempted to show his piety and probably hoping that other nobles would insist upon his election anyway. All right, they're not even considering inheritance, agnatic succession, primogeniture. That's not even a question. The more popular Godfrey was not hesitant like Raymond and accepted the position as leader. Most modern historians chronicle that he took the title at Advocatus Sancti Sepulchri, advocate or defender of the Holy Sepulchre. All right. Others report that Godfrey himself seemed to have used a more ambiguous term, princeps, or simply retained his title of dukes from Lord of the Rings. According to William Tyree, writings in the later 12th century when Godfrey had become a legendary hero, he refused to wear a crown of gold, where Christ had worn a crown of thorns. All right. So the topic today is the crown of thorns. All right. Raymond was incensed and took his army to forge away from the city. The new kingdom and Godfrey's reputation was secret with the defeat of the Fatimid Egyptian army under Abdullah Shah at the Battle of Ascalon. 1 month after the conquest on August 12th, but Raymond and Godfrey continued antagonism, preventing the Crusaders from taking control of Ascalon itself. Okay, so we see that here dealing with the Kingdom of Jerusalem, Godfrey of Bouillon. Godfrey of Bouillon never accepted the title as wearing the crown, but he took because he reserved that for Christ, because he knows that Christ was considered one wearing a crown of thorns. All right, so we need to understand where this crown of thorns and where this concept came from. Okay, we need to understand that. All right, not from the abstract, but from the concrete. Now we know Godfrey of Bouillon, Kingdom of Jerusalem, was succeeded by Baldwin II, and Baldwin II was succeeded by Baldwin III, and Baldwin III was succeeded by Henry V. Part itself was succeeded by Fulk V. All right, who was Count of Anjou. All right, but then only went to become King of Jerusalem and left Anjou to Godfrey V, Count of Anjou. All right, and we know that Count of Anjou, before Fulk V had it, was ruled by Fulk IV. All right, so you must understand this. You must understand the timeline. All right, so let's go back to Crusades are reference to us, since we understand the Crusades from which took place on the continent of Europe and the Eastern and Western Hemisphere. How does that apply to us as the English heirs or Anglo-Saxon Berbers from the Third Typical English Church of England? How does it apply to us? Let's go here. The Sides of Clarendon was an act of Henry II of England, the son of Godfrey, the fifth Count of Anjou, son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem. In 1166, that began a transformation of the English law and led to a trial by jury in common law countries worldwide. You hear that? Worldwide. And that they established what we call the sides courts, which are your county superior courts. Prior system for deciding the winning party, which is what we call compurgation, what's it called? Compurgation, trial by oath, compurgation. Let me just make sure. I think it's called compurgation. There it is, right there, right here. Okay, all right. So I know I wasn't just making something up. The sides of Clarendon. So the sides of Clarendon was an act of Henry II in 1166 that began the transformation of English law and a trial by jury in common law countries worldwide that established the sides court. So that means that includes here in North America. Prior system for deciding winning parties in a case, especially felonies, including trial by ordeal, trial by battle, or trial by compurgation. This is a trial by oath, which is done by 12 citizens, 12 knights, all right, and with evidence, inspection, and inquiry was made under oath by laymen, knights, or ordinary freedmen. After the sides Clarendon trial by jury developed, though some historians say beginning of the jury system predates this act, all right? The sides of Clarendon did not lead to this change immediately. Recourse to trial by compact was not officially rescinded until 1819, though by then it had fallen out of use, okay? So we see what you call a Sixth Amendment or the Seventh Amendment trial by jury under the common law. It must be done in this form of fashion as established by the act passed by the sides of Clarendon of 1166. Because why? You had the Clarendon Constitution passed in 1164. All right. So what was the purpose of the Constitution of Clarendon and the courts of Assize? All right, which is the superior courts that were passed by the monarchs of French monarch at that, French and English monarch at that, because under Godfrey's marriage to Empress Matilda, the daughter of Margaret of Wessex or Margaret of Scotland, who was married to Malcolm III of Scotland, they were all one family. Okay, so we see here that the Clarendon Constitution made way for the sides of Clarendon, which was the courts of the monarchs, okay, known as the King's Bench. What was the problem addressed by the sides courts from the Clarendon Act? All right, let's read it for ourselves. In 1154, Henry II inherited the throne of a troubled England. All right, in full swing were the Crusades, a military endeavor that kept nobles landowners away from their castles for years at a time. Unoccupied and unclaimed, land invited squatters since there was no central recording office, i.e., what we call recorder of deeds, all right, or recorder of registry, offered no central recording office for real property in England at the time. A sorting out who owned what fief, i.e., what tenure or what estate was entrusted to human memory. Disputes arose when aristocrats returned or died thousands of miles from home. Did y'all hear that? Did y'all hear that? 1,000 miles from home. Y'all sleeping on the Third English Church. Another, even more serious, was the aftermath of the anarchy, a disastrous civil war between King Stefan and Empress Matilda. All right, as I just spoke of. The two factions had hired mercenary soldiers, and when there was no one left to pay them, many resorted to robbery and other forms of violence as a profession. Crime followed the breakdown of local authority. The quarrel between king and the empress created more property troubles. As communities were divided, both factions were unhappy to reward their supporters with the lands of local opponents. You hear what's taking place, y'all? You hear. Finally, there was a long-standing difficulty involving the Catholic Church, which culminated in the murder of Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury. The problem for the king was that the church acted like an imperium imperio, a kingdom within a kingdom, only partially, if at all, subject to Henry's law. The church operated on its own system, which answered not to Henry, but to the Pope. You hear that? It was a large landowner. It was a large landowner and a powerful vested interest. Henry wishes to establish a system of justice that would enlarge the power of the crown at an expense of the clergy. The size. Henry therefore promulgated various assize, i.e., courts that converted in a town periodically rather than being permanently established. These are called itinerant courts. All right? Itinerant courts. The primary and most general one, the assize of Clarendon, was issued in 1116. Others, the petty assize, known respectively as the assize of novel decisions or mort the ancestor or the reign presentment, gave more specific relief. Okay? So we see the purpose and intent why the assize courts under the Clarendon Constitution, which was created by Henry II, son of Godfrey V, kind of man Jew, son of folk of rulers of Jerusalem, as a result of the crusades that were going on, as established by the King of Jerusalem, who first king was Godfrey of Bouillon, under the authority of the Pope, which all their Masonic or what they call movements, such as the Knights of Templars, the Knights of Hospitality, grew from. Okay. All of them were under the authority of the Pope. Okay. So we see why we see here in North America why Henry II passed a assize of Clarendon Constitution, assize of Clarendon Constitution or the Clarendon Constitution 1164. All right, which is the establishment clause for the freedom of religion, and that the state, i.e., their body policies, i.e., their corporation, cannot interfere, because the size of Clarendon under the parliamentary government, under the executive power of the king, was an itinerant court, which was a moving government, okay, who was not dealing with commerce, but was dealing with ownership of the lands under the allodial title of the king, and only discharge or divvied out land through estates given by way of what we call deeds. All right, we know deeds are fiefs. All right, or fights. You must understand this terminology. Let's move forward. So we're talking about King of Jerusalem, and the focal point is right here. This is the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the focal point of this lesson. We already talked about the Stride of Turning, also known as Godfrey's cloth. We know that Godfrey's cloth, or the Stride of Turning, wound up in the possession of a Knights Templar by the name of Godfrey de Charnay. And Godfrey de Charnay was commissioned by Baldwin II, the King of Jerusalem, all right, who was preceded by Baldwin I, who was preceded by Godfrey of Bouillon, all right, the very person who we're talking about. So it says here, the Crusaders arrived at Jerusalem in June 1099. A few neighboring towns, as they stated, and were taken first. And Jerusalem itself was captured on July 15th. On on 22nd of July, a council was held at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre to establish a king for the newly created King of Jerusalem, which eventually established with Godfrey of Bouillon. And we said that Godfrey of Bouillon did not want to accept the crown because he left that position for that individual known as the Christ or Jesus Christ. And they said, why should he wear a crown where Christ had wore a crown of thorns? So let's get into the history concerning the crown of thorns. Let me give myself a thumbs up. Crown of Thorns. According to the New Testament, a woven crown of thorns was placed on the head of Jesus during the events leading up to his crucifixion. It was one of the instruments of the passion employed by Jesus' captors, both to cause him pain and to mock his claim of authority. It is mentioned in the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, and John, and is often alluded to by earlier church fathers such as Clement of Alexandria, Origen, and others, along with being referenced in the apocryphal Gospel of St. Peter. All right? This is abstract, so we can care less about this. The next paragraph, focal point. Since at least around the year 400 AD, a relic believed by many to be the crown of thorns has been venerated. In 1238, the Latin Emperor Baldwin II of Constantinople, from the Constantinople origin in the 3rd century, and yielded the relic to French King Louis IX. It was kept in Notre-Dame Cathedral in Paris until the 15th of April 2019, which it was rescued from a fire and moved to the Louvre Museum. Okay, so everybody see that the crown of thorns, which was supposed to be relative to Jesus being crucified on the cross, and we know the Stride of Turning deals with the crucifixion of Christ as the evidentiary proof as a result of him ascension from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, or where the tomb in which he was entombed in. Okay, very important. And this was found up in the position of Louis IX, which is a Frankish king from the Capetan dynasty, which was goes back to the Kingdom of France, led by Hugh Capet, who was the founder of the Kingdom of France. All right, we must understand that. So I read it again. Since at least around the year 400 AD, a relic believed by many to be the crown of thorns has been venerated. And in the 13th century, the Latin Emperor Baldwin II of Constantinople yielded the relic to French King Louis IX. It was kept in Notre-Dame Cathedral in Paris until the 15th of April 2019, when it was rescued from a fire and moved to the Louvre Museum. So all those who want to go see it, you can actually go to the museum and check it out. All right. We don't want to read about it as a relic. We already read it was a relic. We know about Constantinople right here. Sometime afterward, the crown was purportedly moved to Constantinople. Then the capital of the empire, historian Frankios del Millet supposed that the whole crown was transferred from Jerusalem to Constantinople not much before 1063. 1 second.
Are you in class?
Yeah, you okay?
I just have a quick question. Did Pop have some shoes over there that were red and white?
No. What? Talking about sneakers?
Yeah, sneakers.
No.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, boo boo.
Bye.
Okay, that's my daughter. All right. Sometime afterward, the crown was purportedly moved to Constantinople, then capital of empire. Historian Frankios de Millet supposed that the whole crown was transferred from Jerusalem to Constantinople not much before 1063. In any case, Emperor Justinian is stated to have given a thorn to German Bishop of Paris, which was long preserved at Saint Germain des Prés, while the Empress Irene in 798 or 1802 sent Charlemagne several thorns, which were deposited by him at Aachen. 8 of these are said to have been there at the consecration of the Basilica of Aachen, if I'm pronouncing that right. The subsequent history of several of them can be traced without difficulty. 4 were given to Saint Cornelius of Compiègne in 877 by Charles the Bald, a Frankish king. Hugh the Great, Duke of the Franks, sent one to the Anglo-Saxon king Atherton in 997. And on the occasion of certain marriage negotiations, it eventually found its way to Malmesbury Abbey. Another was presented to the Spanish princes about 1160, and again another was taken to Andechs Abbey in Germany in the year 1200 AD. Okay? France. In 1238, Baldwin II, the Latin Emperor of Constantinople, anxious to obtain support for his tottering empire, offered the crown of Thorns to Louis IX of France. It was then in the hands of the Venetians as security for the great loan of 13,134 gold pieces. Yet it was redeemed and conveyed to Paris, where Louis IX built the Sainte-Chapelle, completed in 1248 to receive it. The relic stayed there until the French Revolution, where after finding a home for a while in the Bibliothèque Nationale, the Concordat of 1801 restored it to the Catholic Church, and it was deposited in the Cathedral of Notre-Dame de Paris. Okay? There's the evidence of the track or the tracing of what we call the relic called the Crown of Thorns. One second. Bear with me, y'all. Okay. It says here, in 1238, Baldwin II, the Latin Emperor of Constantinople, anxious to obtain support for his tottering empire, offered the crown to the Thorns of Louis IX of France. Okay? So we see that. We see that. We're talking about the Crown of Thorns, all right? Very important. So who is Louis IX of France? All right? Who is Louis IX? Unbelievable. Two people watching this crazy. Louis IX of France. Louis IX of France, commonly revered as Saint Louis, was king of France from 1226 until his death in 1270. He is widely recognized as the most distinguished of the direct capitains. Following the death of his father, Louis VIII, he was crowned in Reims at the age of 12. His mother, Blanche of Castile, effectively ruled the kingdom as a regent until he came of age. And continued to serve as his trusted advisor until his death. During his formative years, Blanche successfully confronted rebellious vassals and championed the Capitan cause and Albigensian Crusade, which had been ongoing for the past 2 decades. Okay? Louis IX. He was a direct descendant of the Capetans, or the Capitans. All right? He died in Tunis of North Africa. He was born in Poitiers, France. Tunis of Africa is where the last crusade, or what we call the Eighth Crusade, took place. All right. Louis expanded territory, annexed several provinces, including part of Baltic, Maine, and Province. All right. Keeping a promise he made. Let me just go back a little further. Right here. As an adult, Louis IX grabbed conflicts with some of the most influential nobles in his kingdom, including Hugh X of Lusignan and Peter of Drury. Concurrently, England Henry III sought to reclaim the Angevin continental holdings, only to be decisively defeated at the Battle of Talleyrand. Louis expanded his territory by annexing several provinces, including part of Aquitaine, Maine, and Provence. Keeping a promise he made while praying for recovery from a grave illness, Louis led the ill-fated 7th and 8th Crusades against the Muslim dynasty that controlled North Africa, Egypt, and the Holy Lands. Did y'all hear that? He said he controlled the 7th and 8th Crusades against the Muslim dynasties that controlled North Africa, Egypt, and the Holy Land. He was captured and ransomed during the 7th Crusade and later succeeded the dysentery during the 8th Crusade. Succumbed to dysentery during the 8th Crusade. His son Philip II succeeded him. Okay? So here, and this is all concerning the Crown of Thorns. Okay? And we see Louis XIX was part of the Capitan dynasty, a Frankish king who were established the Capitan and Jew side of the Frankish dynasty, who latched on to the Plantagenet dynasty as a result of what we call marriages. All right, let's get down here to later life. Later reign. Later reign. 8th Crusade and death. All right. In the Parliament held in Paris on 24th of March 1267. All right. You know, the Crusade started in the 11th century. All right, 1099. And a Parliament held in Paris March 1267. Louis and his 3 sons took the cross. On hearing the report of the missionary, Louis resolved to the land of Tunis. All right. And he ordered his younger brother, Charles of Anjou, to join him there. The Crusaders, among whom were the English Prince Edward I, called Edward Longshank, landed at Carthage on the 17th of July in 1270, but disease broke out in the camp. Louis died at Tunis on the 25th of August, 1270, and an epidemic of dysentery that swept throughout the army. Okay, so we see that the Crusades of the 8th Crusade ended with Louis IX of de facto house of Anjou of Frankish descent, lined himself with Edward Longshank, who was of the Plantagenet crown, who descended down from Edward III, because he was Henry III, because Edward Longshank or Edward I was the son of Henry III. Okay, Edward I was the father of Edward II, the father of Edward III. Then we get to what they call John Gaunt. The breakdown continues on after that. All right. So this is a result, the Crusade, as a result of the estates or territories that belong to the Plantagenet and the Anjou family, going back to the English under Fulk I, which we'll prove in a second. All right. So Louis IX. All right. Louis IX, very important figure. Why is he a very important figure? Let's see why. Because he was the direct Capitan. That's what they said, right? Capitan Plantagenet robbery. So we have robbery. We know the Plantagenet started with Godfrey the Fifth Count of Anjou, son of Fulk, who was the ruler of Jerusalem. Okay? Contrast to the rulers of Jerusalem who were there at the same time, going back to Godfrey, Bouillon, Baldwin I, and Baldwin II. You didn't get to Fulk V till after Baldwin II, all right? And they were de facto rulers of the Kingdom of England, because they went back to the Frankish kings who descended from Merovingians and Carolingians, going back of King Merovec, known as Clovis I, all right, who never declared to be descendants of God, all right? And that's over here. Not just over there, but that's over here as well. Let's prove it. The Capitan Plantagenet robbery was a series of conflicts and disputes that covered a period of 100 years, during which the House of Capet ruled the Kingdom of France, fought the House of Plantagenet, also known as the House of Anjou. Did you hear that? So the House of Plantagenet was also known as the House of Anjou, which considered all the kings of Anjou, which was Fulk V, who ruled Jerusalem. So that means that the Plantagenet and all their descendants and heirs are of the Jerusalem descendants. Why? Because Henry II went on to create what we call the Angevin Empire. So it says that the Kingdom of France fought the House of Plantagenet. You hear that? The Kingdom of France fought the House of Plantagenet, also known as the House of Anjou, rulers of the Kingdom of England. Did you hear that? The House of Capet, rulers of the Kingdom of France, fought the House of Plantagenet, known as the House of Anjou, who were rulers of the Kingdom of England. All right. All the Plantagenet held Angevin Empire, which at its peak covered around half of the territory within France. Some historians refer to the series of events as the First 100-Year War. All right. This war started in 1159, ended in 1259, known as the Treaty of Paris. All right. Known as the Treaty of Paris. They said that Louis IX was a direct descendant of the Capitan, and the Capitan, who he was the direct descendant of, was one with the Plantagenet dynasty, who were the Anjou family, who were the rulers of the Kingdom of England. So that means England stretched from England all the way to France. All right, that's what that means. All right, and not just that, because it was a cosmopolitan movement. All right. On the Independent Reform and the Including Reform, which was associated together, was in Brittany, England, Portugal, Spain, Jerusalem, and North Africa. Okay, we must understand what we're working with. So let's go to the Treaty of Paris. Can't make this up. I can care about the views I get. If you don't know this, whether you feel it or not, when you come speak to the king, you're going to have real problems. All right? Treaty of Paris. Look at the parties involved. Still talking about that Crown of Thorns, okay? Louis IX was the last person with that crown of thorns. All right. All right. Treaty of Paris, 1259. The Treaty of Paris of 1259, also known as the Treaty of Abbeville, was the treaty between Louis IX, King of France, and Henry III, King of England, which was agreed on the 4th of December 1259, ending the 100-year conflict between the Capitan and the Plantagenet dynasty. Okay, so this individual, Louis XIX, is the one responsible for the Crown of Thorns, which goes all the way back to the Kingdom of Jerusalem, Godfrey of Bouillon, all right, which was the son of Eustace II, who married into family by marrying Gold of England, the son of Ethelred the Unready, the son of Godfrey, King Edgar the Peaceful, who was the great-great-grandson of Alfred the Great, all right, who was born in Berkshire, London, where the name Berber comes from, and you look at the word Berber, that's the calendar they used at that particular time, because you don't get an English week now year until 1066 with William the Conqueror. And William the Conqueror was the one who invaded England, which was ruled by the Council of Anjou, because it just said that the Counts of Anjou or the Plantagenet crown were the rulers of England, who were warned with the Capitan dynasty, who were the rulers of France. All right, which was the result of invasion. So the Treaty of Paris, also known as the Treaty of Abbeville, was a treaty between Louis IX, King of France, and Henry III, King of England. Henry III was the son of John, John, son of Henry II, son of Godfrey, the fifth Count of Anjou, the ruler, son of Folk, the ruler of Jerusalem. Okay, and the Count of Anjou in France. All right, we must understand this history. Shh. All right, Treaty of Paris. So Louis IX, King of France, was the one who signed and ended the war known as the 100-year conflict with Henry III, King of England. All right, it's 1259. We know that the Capitan dynasty was established in 1159. Okay, the Crusade started in 1099. All right, we know that. Let's go back here. Treaty of Paris. All right, so let's end this. Godfrey. Okay. Godfrey V, called the Handsome Fair, all right, or Plantagenet, was the Count of Anjou, Touraine, Maine, by heritage from 1129, and also Duke of Normandy by his marriage claim and conquest from 1144. Godfrey married to Empress Matilda, all right. Empress Matilda was the son of this is daughter of Margaret Matilda of Scotland. And Matilda of Scotland was the daughter of Margaret of Scotland. All right? Yeah, Matilda of Scotland. All right, let me show this. Godfrey married Empress Matilda, daughter of King Henry I. Okay? And Henry I was the daughter of William the Conqueror. All right? Did y'all hear what I just said? Godfrey married to Empress Matilda, daughter of King Henry I. All right? And Duke of Normandy, led through their son Henry II to a 300-year-long reign of the Plantagenet dynasty. Was taken for the dynasty from Godfrey Effet. Long after his death, Godfrey was of the Anjou, and the ancestral domain of Anjou in north-central France gave rise to the name Angevin, and was in what modern historians name the Angevin Empire in the 12th century. Did y'all hear that? All right, so I'm gonna read it one more time. All right. Godfrey married to Empress Matilda, daughter of King Henry I, Henry of England, and Duke of Normandy, led through their son Henry II. All right, Henry II of England. All right, or called Kirk Mantel, to a 300-year-long reign of the Plantagenet dynasty in England. Very important. Very, 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 very important. Because Godfrey and all their descendants were Berbers. They weren't English kings. They were Berbers. How we know that? Let's prove it. We look right over stuff, y'all. The king won't let you do it. (1066). And the Gregorian year is 1066, and the Berber year is 2016. The Berber year for us, well, hold on a second.